Okay, let's talk about those phone calls because, like I said, there are a lot of phone calls.
Yeah,
The phone calls between Vitkov and Ushakov, right? And
yeah,
then there's also a Ushakov and a phone call between Ushakov and the Russian.
yeah.
I think is
Dmitriev. Yeah,
Dmitriev. He's the economic
yeah.
advisor, right, for
That's right. That's
Putin.
right.
So, what do you make of these phone call? They're leaks, right? They
Felix.
got leaked what they were
Yes.
talking about.
Well, the contents of the phone calls themselves are completely uninteresting and
Mhm.
completely innocuous. I mean, there is nothing there that I would take, frankly, as being at all concerning. I would make one point. Ushakov himself has a background as a diplomat. He's a very, very experienced Russian diplomat. He
Mhm.
was formerly ambassador to Washington. I mean, so
Okay.
that tells you how senior he was. Neither Witkoff nor Dmitriev have any kind of diplomatic background. So you would expect that they would say things in a more loose way
Mhm.
than professional diplomats might do. But even allowing for that, there's really nothing here that should really cause anybody any embarrassment and any trouble. There's two things to say about this. Firstly, clearly there is surveillance going on. I mean, the United States is uh, listening in to these conversations. It's listening in to the conversations that Witkoff, who is the authorized representative of the President of the United States, is having with the representative of a foreign power, and which is a conversation that is about the conduct of the diplomacy of the President of the United States and therefore of the United States. So somebody's listening into these calls, and that's already a hostile thing.
Mhm.
And then, of course, they publish
Yeah.
extracts of these calls. Now, the first thing to say is that this is an extremely serious criminal offense. I've obtained legal advice about this, including from American lawyers, one of whom is Robert Barnes, and we
Mhm.
asked him about this on our live stream, and he confirmed it. This is an extremely serious criminal offense. These are clearly classified calls, and nonetheless, leaking is taking place. So, on the one hand, you are conducting surveillance on the president's officials, and secondly, you are leaking the content of diplomatic telephone calls. I mean, this is as bad as it gets. And it tells you that there is a major power struggle underway in Washington. And it reminds me, I have to say, of the early months of the Russiagate scandal, when again we were getting lots and lots of leaks, including leaks of telephone conversations, one of which between Michael Flynn and the Russian ambassador at that time, Sergei Kislyak. Clearly a classified call, and yet, as I said, its contents were leaked, and all in order to press forward with, um, you know, power struggles, destabilize the president's attempt to conduct foreign policy.
So they're not happy with Trump is trying to uh, make a peace deal. They're trying to
Yeah.
undermine that. Is that the
Yeah,
purpose of
that
leaking
that
of
that's
this phone call?
that's exactly the purpose of this. What they're
Yeah.
trying to do, what they were trying to imply here, is that the proposals that we've been seeing coming out of Washington are
Mhm.
not really American proposals at all. That
Mhm.
Dmitriev and Ushakov have been dictating these proposals to Witkoff, who
Mhm.
has then been basically writing them, so that Witkoff is essentially a traitor acting on Russia's behalf, and by
Mhm.
implication, so is Trump. Now, that is ridiculous, and that's not what these calls actually show, but
Mhm.
that's the spin that's been given. So they're trying to undermine the entire process of negotiations, which is underway.
So regarding the negotiation, so there was the 28 points, and then there's a
Mm,
19 points. So
yeah.
where are we right now?
But we're where indeed, because The Russians are very, very skeptical about this whole process.
Mm-hmm.
Putin gave a very powerful press conference um, yesterday. By the way, he's due to meet Wang Yi. Wang Yi's headed
That's right.
to
Uh-huh.
Moscow.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you know, the Russians are going to be talking to their friends as well as their enemies, if I can put it like that. But what the Russians have said is that we came to an understanding with Trump in Alaska. The Americans, as we now know, there was no actual agreements made in Alaska,
Mm-hmm.
except that the Americans would set out, codify certain issues that they'd arranged as talking points. And the Russians were waiting for the Americans to do that so that a serious process of negotiations between the United States and Russia could begin. Uh, we never got there,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm starting to think that we never will, because the Americans are clearly not united about this, which is why we're getting these leaks, and the Europeans are opposed, and the proposals that the talking points are changing all the time, and they're increasingly moving away from what the Russians are prepared to talk about.
So what's happened next then?
Well, what happens next? There's going to be a meeting. Witkoff is going to come to Moscow next week.
Okay.
We'll see if something can be cobbled together. But if it isn't, it'll all fall apart. Everybody can see that the Russian army now is advancing fast
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
Ukraine and that Ukraine is losing the war. Everybody except the Ukrainians and their European friends, I should say. So
Mm-hmm.
the talks will collapse. And given the situation in Ukraine, there will be massive pressure in Washington and from Europe for further escalation against Russia. More sanctions, more missiles, all of that kind of thing. All of the things that have failed already, but they'll try and do them again. That it seems to me is the most likely development here.
So it will still be determined, more or less determined in the battleground.
Yes, I
Okay.
think so.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. I mean, the Russians. And by the way, Putin made a very interesting statement a couple of days ago, in which he said, "Look, we came to these understandings with the Americans in Alaska, and one of the reasons we did that is because our friends want us to. They
Uh-huh. Okay.
want to see
Mm-hmm.
us trying to work towards
Mm-hmm.
a diplomatic negotiated course. If it was just us, we might not be doing this, but China wants us to, India wants us to, Brazil wants us to, and we're not going to go against our friends. We're not going to go against the wishes of our friends. But he also went on to say, if we can't move forward, well, then we will continue the war, and we will do so until we win.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay, the Middle East. Now,
Mm,
MBS recently visited the White House, right?
mm.
So they again talk about the Abraham Accords. Now, exactly what does Abraham Accords do?
Yeah.
Trump tries to, he pushes very hard on the Abraham Accords. Why does he do that? Why does he want to do that?
Yes. Yes. I mean, I should say, first of all, that, I mean, all of the external pomp and circumstance around that visit has apparently concealed the fact that the visit itself didn't go very well.
Okay.
MBS apparently was not receptive, not just over the Abraham Accords, but to many other things that the Americans
Mm-hmm.
wanted him to do, including in relation to oil prices, just to say
Okay.
this.
Mm-hmm.
But the Abraham Accords were basically a series of agreements that were negotiated during Trump's first term, whereby certain Arab states in the Gulf established diplomatic relations with Israel. And it's all part of a big attempt that Trump and his team have been making to basically normalize Israel,
Okay.
to
Mm-hmm.
get Israel accepted in the Middle East as a respectable country, a respected and respectable country that's part of the whole Middle East setup, and to end, in effect, the sense of an Arab-Israeli conflict and to marginalize the Palestinian part of the conflict. Now, the Arab countries that have agreed to establish diplomatic relations with Israel are relatively small, places like the UAE, for example. The big one is Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't really say that the process of normalizing Israel's status in the Middle East has been fully achieved until and unless you get Saudi Arabia to establish diplomatic relations with Israel. But Saudi Arabia is, of course, a religious monarchy.
Mm-hmm.
It is the country where Mecca and Medina, the two big religious centers, are located. The official title of the King of Saudi Arabia is the guardian or custodian of the two holy mosques, Mecca and Medina. What MBS said to Trump is, we cannot do this. Feeling in Saudi Arabia is too strong against us doing this. We have to see first some actual movement towards establishing a Palestinian state. Unless that happens, we cannot take this step that you want us to do. And the Americans apparently were very disappointed.
Why does Trump find this surprising, consider what just happened, right? And still probably going on in Gaza.
Yeah.
I mean, MBS, I thought I read somewhere he even said that he personally probably okay with it, but he knows his people are very much against Israel right
Exactly.
now. So how
Exactly.
come Trump doesn't understand that?
Well, but you've discussed this many times. I mean, American racism at the end of
Yeah.
the day. I mean, they don't take the Palestinians very seriously. They don't take the feelings of the Arabs very seriously.
Yeah.
They imagine that everybody can be either bullied or bought into doing what America wants. It suits America, or at least it suits this particular group of people who are leading America, to get the Arab states to have good relations with Israel. So they think they can bully and buy these countries into doing that. And then when they discover that these countries can't do it, they're angry and they're surprised. And well, we'll see what happens next.